Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. In University City, a single street tells a story of growth, challenge, and loss. The homeowners on Mayflower Court who still live there have spent the last few years watching the neighborhoods around them change forever. Those changes in University City have brought some positive things, like a Costco. The big box retail store anchors a $190 million development called the Market at Olive. After years of waiting and delays, it finally opened in October of 2022. Its goods draw shoppers from the city and county, and its tax revenue adds to the city's budget. The development reshaped an area that was once home to immigrant restaurants and nearby, streets lined with tidy brick houses. The people who lived there watched the Costco rise over them. Many residents eventually sold their homes to the developer. Some tried to hold on until faced with the threat of eminent domain. Those homes are now gone. That's not what happened on Mayflower Court. Under the development plan, the 16 homes on that street were supposed to be bought and bulldozed to create an apartment complex. The developer instead backed away from the deal last year, shocking residents and leaving them stranded. And there's now something else happening on Mayflower. St. Louis Public Radio has learned that police in St. Louis County are using the houses on this block as training grounds for SWAT teams in the use of forced entry. Such use of these homes by police alarmed Nichole Angieri. She's lived on Mayflower Court for years with her husband and children, and she joins me now. Nichole, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you.
You spoke with our show in 2022, talking about what happened when the developer Seneca abruptly pulled out of a deal to buy the homes on your street. Now, before we get to the subject of the police making your cul-de-sac a training ground, remind us briefly about what happened on Mayflower Court in these last few years, particularly in the lead up to the summer of 2022.
Sure. So as a neighborhood, we did not want to sell our homes. We enjoyed where we lived. It was a safe, secure neighborhood, and we were pretty adamant that we didn't want to leave. Then we decided that we needed to consider it based on the changing neighborhood of our surroundings. And then the developer was not offering enough money for us to move to a similar location. Finally, after months and months of negotiation, we came together as a block to decide on prices and terms for moving as a whole neighborhood. And just a few days, a week before we were supposed to close and move out of our homes, we got notice that the developer wasn't going to follow through on the sales contracts and wouldn't be purchasing the remainder of the homes.
Mm-hmm. So this is summer of 2022. The developer Seneca, and I am putting a fine point on that because there has been more than one throughout this whole process. Seneca had a plan for apartments on Mayflower Court, and Seneca's president, Larry Chapman, told the University City Council he was preparing to negotiate with homeowners like you, Nichole, to buy them out, then demolish the homes to make room for that new construction. So, I mean, when that plan fell apart a year later in summer of 2023, how did you find out?
So we received an email that said, due to unseen circumstances, we will not be purchasing the remainder of the homes on Mayflower Court. The very next day, they put boards up on the homes that they had purchased.
And what did that mean for you?
It was like watching my neighborhood be dismantled. The families that did leave. It was the grieving the loss of community members who didn't want to leave in the first place. And to find out that they had taken half of the neighborhood, boarded up half of the neighborhood, and were just going to walk away from the other half, it was devastating.
Mm-hmm. And when we were talking before the segment started, we talk about buildings, we talk about houses, then we talk about homes, which kind of gives it more of that human feel. Mm-hmm. But these were also homes with names, right?
Yes. I have wonderful memories of Miss Jessie across the street helping me with my children when they were little. We used to have Easter egg hunts in Miss Gale's front yard, which is across the street. Mr. Washington next door was known to have the most beautiful garden in the area. And, my children grew up climbing all of the trees on all of the neighbors' yards. Mm-hmm. And so it was our community. It's where we spent, when we weren't working, we were in the neighborhood together as a community.
Right. No, I did have a chance to drive by there. There are now not as many trees, certainly not as many new neighbors, but there are new neighbors, sort of. Nichole, talk to us about the police showing up on Mayflower Court. Did you know that they would be coming?
I had no idea. So it was around 7:30 in the morning. I have two dogs who, were going crazy, and there was a knock at the door. And when I opened the door, there was a police officer in full tactical gear, and he asked, he said, I was just making sure that somebody lived here. We weren't sure which homes were occupied. We're going to be doing training in your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Are any of the other homes occupied? So I pointed out this home, this home, this home, this home. And so it was quite alarming, one, for them not to have already confirmed which homes were occupied.
Right.
And then two, who isn't alarmed when you wake up and there are multiple police vehicles, everyone is armed, they have shields, and it's 7:30 in the morning.
Right. And the police came today, correct?
Yes, actually, on my way here, the entire cul-de-sac and street was lined with police officers, the big black police trucks, canine units, police dogs.
You reached out to University City officials, Nichole, to complain and demand answers, and you called the training another violation against the residents, both remaining and past, of Mayflower Court. What did you mean by that?
Well, first, we have already been disturbed by the noise from the construction, the light pollution that we now experience from the parking lots, the removal of beloved trees that lined our streets, and then just the lack of security, knowing that it's us against the city, it's us against the developers, and I want to be careful about this language, but us against the police, meaning we're the only ones sticking up for ourselves. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, the other civil entities around us are basically not honoring our private property, our right to peace, and our right to, security, meaning I know that next month my house is safe, and I'm not going to be having to wait for the next developer to then have to fight for my home again.
Right. I'd like to bring in another voice here. Danny Wicentowski is a producer for St. Louis on the Air. He's reported for years on the Costco development and how it affected residents like you in University City. Danny, thank you for being with us.
Good to be here.
So you've been following up on what Nichole's shared with us about what's happening on Mayflower Court. What is it that you've learned about the police training there?
So I talked with a spokesperson from the St. Louis County Police earlier this hour. She explained that, I think the big issue here is that University City was made aware of this. They went and they got permission from University City before they went in to do this training. As Nichole mentioned, there are between 6 or 7 homes that are essentially have passed between one developer to another and now to another developer. These were homes that were planned to be bought and then bulldozed with the rest of them. This subdivision, like a few of the other ones that are very similar, are right up against that Costco construction zone. They are, this was not planned to have a nice backyard, facing this building or this construction. So these plans have now changed. So I've been told that this developer, the person who does own these homes, gave permission to the police. The police said that they would not do this with just the developer's permission. They did reach out to University City. I asked, is this common, to do this sort of training in a place that is, this is not an abandoned field somewhere. They said, this is how police train their officers to be comfortable doing a forced entry into different kinds of homes. Different homes have different layouts. They do this in empty schools or structures that were empty during COVID. The spokesperson did mention a couple details. They claimed that they, tried to not make loud noises. They had battering rams, but they were used, kind of just to show the placement of them, but didn't actually smash the doors down. They did. With that being said, they did practice forced entry. They did break into these homes. They did, go through the process of what these SWAT and tactical teams have to plan for when they're, going into this kind of area. But overall, this appears legal, but in many of the ways that residents like Nichole have been treated, this is a situation where there are fingers being pointed. This is not our problem, but fundamentally, this is both the city, the developer, and the police saying, look, we get to do what we want in this case. We did it. The homeowners don't really have a say, even though, we're right in their, on their street.
Mm-hmm. And what is it that University City officials have come back with? I mean, have they responded?
So that is something we're going to follow up on. I did know that, Nichole, you got a response back, from a city official in University City. I don't know if you've heard anything since that, but at least that they're responding to your complaint.
They did respond. So City Manager Rose said, basically, why are you telling me this? Councilman Clay said, this shouldn't be happening. This is inappropriate. And then referred me to the Ward 3 councilman, and then suggested that I reach out to the police chief of University City.
Elaine, I think this speaks to the larger picture of what has been happening in University City in this project since 2018 and a few years before. But you had a process where you had University City wanted this development. They needed the tax revenue that could be generated by a Costco. But the process that followed that was one where the city made a deal with the developers. The developers went out and got financing, and all of this process really did not include these homeowners and people who were told, these areas you've been in for a while, these homes you've had, you've got to make all new plans, and it's on you. Mm-hmm. You're going to be the one negotiating. You're the one deciding whether to have a buyout. When I reported on this, questions about timeline, questions about what are residents going to hear news, questions about the businesses that also moved, those were always referred back to the developer. University City, it's not that they're not in charge of financing. They're not the ones who are, really in control of this. What their degree was, they signed off on eminent domain, giving developers this incredible leverage to kick people out of their homes and businesses, to force those sales. And now I'm curious, Nichole, where this leaves you, because now that's not even on the table. Eminent domain isn't even there yet, and yet you're still in that place.
Mm-hmm. Danny, to what extent is what has happened to Mayflower Court unusual?
This has happened, there was another location called Sunset Hills, but this is kind of baked into this economic kind of package. If you want to replace a big part of your town with something that'll make more tax revenue, you can do it. If you as the city leaders can ally yourself with the developers and split up this kind of the authority. And at the end of the day, folks like Nichole really don't have a lot of power. The only power they really have is the decision to sell or not on terms that they may not have had a role in.
Mm-hmm. No, Nichole, one of the things, as we're talking here, we're talking about a developer, we're talking about a city, we're talking about county entities, we're talking about adults, but we have not really talked about kids and families. And, your children have grown up with this project in their literal backyard and now in front of your street almost their entire lives. How has this impacted them?
Sure. So my children, unfortunately, have spent the last 7 years watching their neighborhood be dismantled. They have slowly watched neighbors move out. They have gone from a fully secure, safe neighborhood and overnight to a neighborhood with boarded up buildings, to a home where we've never had to call the police, but because of the abandoned buildings, we've had to have an increase, contact with police officers because it becomes a beacon for individuals who don't have the best intentions. They've also, unfortunately seen what happens when a city entity and a private developer entity has a bottom dollar in mind. And so I think, I've raised my children to have a respect and to engage as a citizen. But unfortunately, they've seen that their city, the people who their parents have elected to support them, are actually taking advantage of their citizens. And aren't living up to the ideals that I've taught my children to have when it comes to being a citizen and being active in your community.
And these are not little kids. We're talking about teenagers. So, Nichole, what is next for you? If eminent domain is no longer on the table and the development's not going to happen, what is next?
Next is for me to continue to fight for my neighborhood. If I don't, who is going to? And so I love my neighborhood. I love my house, right? And at this point, it's been 7 years, and my responsibility now is to make sure I have a whole neighborhood, and to make sure that the safe place that my children have had their entire childhood remains a safe place.
Nichole Angieri is a resident of Mayflower Court in University City. Nichole, thank you so much for joining us today. And Danny Wicentowski, thank you for sharing your insights.
This episode was produced by Danny Wicentowski.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.